All right, so today we're diving into a pretty heavy strategic forecast. It comes with a truly chilling prediction that sometime between 2025 and 2050, humanity as we currently know it could face extinction. But we're not talking about an asteroid or some super virus. No, this is about a forced evolution, one that's going to completely redefine what it even means to be human. So the source material we're breaking down today really kicks off with this very provocative, non-negotiable idea. It argues that the second we directly fuse our brains with machines, we're not just improving ourselves anymore. No, we are in fact creating something entirely new, a new species. And that's the core concept we're going to unpack right now. So here's the roadmap for how we're going to do that. We'll start by really digging into this unique idea of extinction. Then we'll look at the global crises that are basically forcing our hand. From there, we'll see how all of this creates a deep political divide, which leads to an inescapable arms race and, well, a pretty dramatic conclusion. Okay, so first things first, let's be crystal clear about what this forecast means by extinction. It's not talking about the end of all life on Earth. It's forecasting the end of what it calls historical man. You know, the biological Homo sapiens that's been walking around for millennia. Us. This is the absolute crucial point. The forecast argues that this massive push towards transhumanism, which is being driven by all these global pressures, isn't a step up for our species. It's what's called an ontological rupture. It's a philosophical and biological break so profound, so fundamental, that it's basically the same thing as the extinction of Homo sapiens. So you have to ask, right? What on earth could drive such a radical transformation? I mean, it sounds like science fiction, but the source points to a single, massive accelerator, a global polycrisis that acts like some kind of inescapable vortex. And a polycrisis isn't just, a bunch of bad things happening at once, like climate change, economic instability, and geopolitical conflict. It's about how all these crises get tangled up together. They feed off each other in these accelerating feedback loops and create a situation that is way more dangerous than just the sum of its parts. And look, this isn't just a concept. The source we're looking at actually cites advanced quantitative models that put a hard number on the risk, a 57.45% chance of a generalized systemic collapse within the next decade. The models even identify this really critical window of maximum vulnerability somewhere between 2030 and 2032. That's supposedly when our ability to just absorb all these shocks might finally run out. Now, the engine that's really driving this instability is what the source calls the asymmetry of speeds. Just think about it. Technology, especially AI, is moving forward exponentially. It's just exploding. But our laws, our institutions, our whole societies, we adapt at a crawl, at a slow linear pace. And that gap creates this massive destabilizing pressure, forcing governments to seriously consider handing over the keys to AI systems just out of sheer desperation to manage all the complexity. And of course, this tech race fuels a brutal, zero-sum game for the resources you need to build it all. We're already seeing nations weaponize critical minerals like lithium and cobalt. This is way beyond just economic competition. It's becoming a Darwinian struggle for survival, where having the best computational power is the same thing as having national sovereignty. So you have this intense pressure cooker of crisis and competition. And what happens? Well, it inevitably forces a fundamental split in how the entire world looks at the very idea of human augmentation. And what we see are two very different camps emerging. On one side, you've got the democratic West, which generally sees radical augmentation as a threat to human dignity, so it tries to contain it with laws and bioethics. But on the other side, you've got authoritarian regimes that see human-machine fusion as the ultimate strategic weapon, a tool for absolute military and social control. The West's approach is basically to build a legal fortress around the human mind. You've got countries like Chile and Spain that are already pioneering something called neurorights. These are actual legal protections for our thoughts and our identity. They're trying to treat our neural data with the same sacred status as our physical organs. But here's the fatal flaw that the source identifies. In a ruthless, gloves-off geopolitical competition, these noble ethical limits, well, they risk becoming a fatal strategic handicap. Because if you choose not to enhance, you might just be guaranteeing your defeat against a rival who has absolutely zero of those reservations. And this is exactly what that rival paradigm looks like. For regimes that are all in on intelligentized warfare, the unenhanced human soldier is a liability. They're just too slow, too prone to error. The goal is total military-civil fusion. We're talking developing brain-computer interfaces to command entire drone swarms with a single thought, and to wage cognitive warfare directly on an enemy's mind. This deep, deep divide triggers what political scientists call a security dilemma. And it's basically a vicious cycle that, according to this forecast, there is simply no escape from. The cold logic here is kind of inescapable. First off, you can't verify an enemy's cognitive enhancements like you can inspect a nuclear warhead. It's completely opaque. Second, the sheer terror of an adversary making a sudden post-human leap makes doing nothing an existential threat. And third, when your very survival is on the line, ethics suddenly become a luxury you just can't afford. It forces everyone into a race to the bottom. So the outcome is presented as almost mechanically inevitable. According to this forecast, it's not going to be scientific curiosity or the dream of a better future that pushes the West to embrace human augmentation. Nope. It will be the raw, visceral fear of being completely annihilated by a technologically superior post-human adversary. And that brings us to the final, chilling conclusion of this whole forecast: extinction by design, the ultimate final break from our entire biological history. The source uses a very specific biological term for this: extinction by anagenesis. It's what happens when a species changes so radically and so fast that the original version is just completely replaced by its new descendant. What takes natural evolution eons, technology is on track to do in just a few decades. And so here is the final verdict. The forecast concludes that by 2050, that geopolitical security dilemma will have forced everyone's hand. Those paper walls of bioethics will have crumbled, and the unaltered biological human, well, will be an obsolete relic, totally unable to compete in a world that's dominated by our hyper-modified post-human successors. Which leaves us with one last, really unsettling question to chew on. The entire logic of this forecast, from beginning to end, rests on this desperate, all-consuming drive for geopolitical survival. But if that survival demands that we abandon our own humanity to achieve it, what exactly are we even fighting to save?